Let me start by welcoming Secretary Shinseki and Secretary Donovan before this committee. 2 years ago, these two subcommittees held a joint hearing to discuss this same issue and hear from the two departments on how they are working together to tackle this problem. There is still a long ways to go, but according to the VA, the homeless rate among vets has dropped from 154,000 in 2008 to 107,000 at the end of 2009. Nevertheless, in South Dakota alone, there remain an estimated 740 homeless vets. One homeless vet is too many. 107,000 homeless vets is a tragedy. As chairman of the Milcon VA Appropriations Subcommittee, I have had an opportunity to meet with Secretary Shinseki and Secretary Donovan often, and I am very impressed by their commitment to ending homelessness among veterans. Working together, I believe that the VA and HUD can make a difference in the lives of homeless vets. The HUD FASH program is an important gateway to making this difference. I appreciate the effort that both of our witnesses are devoting to this effort, and I look forward to their testimony. I would like to mention that our colleague, Senator Jack Reed, wanted to be here today, but he is chairing a banking subcommittee hearing. Senator Reed has been a leader on vet issues and it has introduced the legislation, which I am proud to co-sponsor, to improve many of the existing programs we are discussing today. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Secretary Donovan, as I understand it, Native American tribes are not eligible under the HUD-VASH program to receive vouchers. How can this permanent housing approach be adapted to allow tribes to participate?
First of all, just to be clear, Native Americans themselves are eligible, and I think it's important that housing authorities around the country ensure that we're making connections to Native American veterans who would be eligible for the program. But you do correctly cite the fact that the statutes that created the voucher law more broadly don't make tribes themselves eligible to administer and oversee the vouchers. That is something, obviously, if Congress were to determine that that should be changed, it's obviously something we could discuss with the committees. But currently, the opportunity for tribes to serve homeless veterans directly is through their Native American Housing Block Grant Program. They can create a similar kind of rental assistance to the vouchers. It's not identical, but they can use the ongoing resources that they receive through the Native American Housing Block Grant to serve homeless veterans in a similar way to HUD-VASH. And we'd be happy to follow up with you with more details about those opportunities.
Yes, do that. Secretary Shinseki, last year we provided an additional $50 million in modern construction for the VA to renovate empty buildings and VA campuses to be used for community-operated homeless programs. What is the status of this initiative, and is the VA considering creating permanent housing for homeless vets on VA campuses?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A good question, important one. We call this our BUR program, Building Utilization, Reuse, and Review. Thanks to the work of Congress, we received the $50 million and that was provided by Milcon. We've put it to work with these priorities: increase housing opportunities, specifically looking at patients with polytrauma diagnosis, preventing homelessness for veterans who are in their own homes but who may be at risk of being homeless. using this to keep them stable, and then reducing the current homelessness veteran population. So those are the three pieces of it. We started with 49 sites that were designated through a site review process. I can tell you that 18 sites are under development. 5 developers have been selected. RFPs have been issued. RFPs are under review, and there are 6 pending requests for proposals, RFPs. 8 sites are moving forward in Salem, Virginia, Asheville, Bay Pines, and Lake City, Florida, Danville, Illinois, Long Beach, California, Des Moines, Iowa, Menlo Park. So we've gotten to identifying locations. 3 sites have been designated for assisted living, and then 20 sites are still under further study. So that's sort of the stamp of where we are today.
Secretary Donovan and Secretary Shinseki, there seems to be a growing discussion over a permanent housing approach versus a transitional approach. Can you give us your thoughts on both approaches and what you believe is the best path forward in terms of housing programs over the next 10 years?
Mr. Chairman, I think this touches a little bit also on Senator Bond's question about 100,000. Why aren't you looking for 100,000 HUD-VASH? I think we need a combination of options here. I think moving people, getting people out of homelessness is sort of a journey and not trying to go from 0 to 60 too quickly. There is a requirement for temporary housing. There is a certain requirement for sort of the transitional housing. And then as you deal with the more serious cases, of course, then you'll have to have permanent housing with supportive services. I think both of us would point out that in the long term, prevention is probably the best way to go. That if we can keep people stable in their current houses and help them through the rough period, it's good for them, and in the long run, it's a more efficient process. When we're not able to do that, then our effort should be to, as quickly as possible, turn them around and get them back into either their housing or a permanent situation. That the longer they live on the streets in a homeless situation, things happen and people change. And this is where the definition of chronic homelessness sets in. If they're on the streets for a year, I think we call them chronically homeless, not because it's just a term, but because things begin to change, their attitude and makeup, and so we want to avoid that. Or folks who have 4 homeless incidents in 3 years also meets this standard of chronic homelessness. So it's more than just a tag term. There is something about long-term homelessness that goes with that chronic identification. So keep people prevention first, a quick turn, and this is where rapid rehousing, I think, is HUD's solution to the program. We've learned from that. We've created our version of it, and it's called support services to veterans' families. It's in the 11 budget. But to get people very quickly back and not let them live on the streets for an extended period of time. And then when you're not able to do that, then you have the rest of the options to include HUD-VASH. I think you need a combination of all. I think we'll get better at rheostating exactly where the balance is. And I think in reality, at the end of the 5-year mark, the veterans we'll be dealing with would be the hard-to-serve cases for the most part. That if we've been successful, as we intend to be in the rest of this, we'll have the very tough cases at the end, and we're going to have to really be at the top of our game, and we'll learn over the next 2 or 3 years.
I think Secretary Shinseki has said it well. It is about finding the right solution for the individual or the family, and that really varies. And I think one of the reasons we've been able to make so much progress on chronic homelessness, why the numbers Secretary gave you earlier about the progress on veterans homelessness as well, is a lot of it is about targeting, collaborating across agencies, and being able to really say, here is an individual who has been chronically homeless, and what the solution for them is going to be different from a family that with just a month's rent or a security deposit or even a utility bill, if they're in housing already and at risk of losing it, can be a more effective solution for them and much cheaper for the taxpayer in the long run. And so it really is about that targeting. Other than that, I just say one other thing, which is that I think we've learned over time that permanent housing is something that can work faster and more effectively than we might have thought for even some of the most difficult to serve. And that's where I think this housing first model is so critical. There will continue to be needs for transitional housing, as we've said, but making sure that the emphasis is not on putting a Band-Aid on the solution with a shelter bed, but making sure that we're getting to the long-term solutions, and oftentimes getting somebody stably housed in a permanent housing situation first can lead to much longer-term benefits. It gives them a stable platform to be able to deal with many of the other issues in their lives that too often in the past we said to them, well, go deal with those issues first and then come back and we'll find you a permanent housing solution. We've been able to reverse that with the housing first approach, and it has been very, very effective in a large number of cases.